Welcome back to World Studies. I hope you all had a wonderful 4-day weekend. Hope you all had a happy Easter. Remember, the reason we celebrate Easter is because of the Lord's resurrection. He is risen indeed. Even though we might not have been able to enjoy all the action that people today attribute towards Easter. Perhaps there were no Easter egg hunts. There were no rushes to buy the Easter dresses and outfits that people think about when they think of Easter. We can still celebrate in the fact that Jesus did rise from the dead. Jesus paid it all on the cross. And then, best of all, he conquered death so that we can have hope for an eternity. This is the start of week 3 in our online classes. You should now have already turned in your second packet worth of material. Just want to make a comment. Many of you guys, most of you were able to turn in your first week's packet, so thank you. I applaud you. Almost all of you did so. Hope that you all continue to get the work done. Remember, it's still counted as grades. Check out now if you're wondering what your grade looks like. And let's begin. We're on page 319. We're going through now the second half of the instability following the war. What war? World War I. So let's continue. Letter B, struggle for a long-term peace. Long-term peace was led by men like Woodrow Wilson. And some of these nations sought a way to ensure that the world would never again experience a major conflict like World War I. They joined organizations created to promote this goal, or they made treaties of disarmament to prevent future conflicts. So let's talk about some of them. Number 1, the League of Nations. I don't know about you, but when I think of the League of Nations, I think of some superhero movie. I think of some action Marvel movie taking place, or maybe I'm thinking of the Justice League. I don't know what I'm thinking, but that's kind of the idea that we get, this idea of this formation of united countries working together to promote peace around the world. Well, it was created by Woodrow Wilson, President Woodrow Wilson, and it sought to promote international cooperation and to prevent future wars. Rather than going to war, nations could come together and discuss their differences and come to a peaceful conclusion. However, this organization was doomed to failure. For instance, the U.S. refused to join. Imagine that. Our president helps create this organization, but the U.S. itself refused. And the League was too weak to enforce its recommendations on more powerful nations. The League represents an early effort to establish a one-world government system. One reason the U.S. didn't join was because of potential loss of U.S. sovereignty. And so the Senate refused to ratify the League Treaty. Number 2, disarmament and non-aggression pacts. These agreements sought to prevent war and would eventually fail as well. One of the reasons why World War I happened was because countries were building up their militaries much higher than they ever needed to be for strictly defense. So, logically speaking, if you remove those huge militaries, then peace would remain. Well, that's the logic. Let's see how it works. The Washington Naval Conference agreed to limit the number of warships that each nation could build. The participants assumed that nations could avoid war by simply reducing or eliminating the weapons. In the end, this will fail because not all warships were included in this. Also, nations like Japan simply ignored the rules that were established. The Locarno Pact was a treaty recognizing the boundaries of Germany, Belgium, and France. If we think about it, wasn't that the cause really of World War I? Germany invaded France through Belgium. Well, according to this treaty now, all three countries will recognize their political boundaries as permanent. This would theoretically have prevented World War I had it been around, and it would prevent any future conflicts from happening between these countries. Unfortunately, this pact briefly offered the promise of peace in Europe. Of course, we know what's going to happen next chapter. It's not going to last. And then one more, the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Nations agreed to settle their difference by negotiation rather than force. In short, this agreement outlawed war. That sounds pretty nice. That sounds pretty amazing. I wish we could have that view taking place today. Well, yes, it's a nice idea. It's idealistic, but it's not practical. Yet 3 years after signing this pact, Japan, one of the signees, invaded Manchuria. So you can see again, it's a nice idea, but it's not actually going to be enforced or enforceable. Letter C, let's talk about the shifts in the post-war world. European imperialism changed after World War I. Colonies did not gain their independence, but many demanded it. China sought to remain independent and reform itself. Japan ceased to be an allied nation and became a serious threat. Former German and Ottoman colonies came under British and French control. So let's begin with China. The struggle for power. With the collapse of the Qing dynasty, remember we talked about the Qing dynasty last chapter, the last Chinese dynasty. A man by the name of Sun Yat-sen established a republic through the Kuomintang Party, also known as the Nationalist Party. Young Chinese officials and military leaders led a revolt against the Qing dynasty, established reform, and created this new republic. So China no longer has an emperor. China no longer has a monarchy. Now they have a democracy in some way, shape, and form. When Sun Yat-sen died, Chiang Kai-shek took over. He continued to lead the Nationalist Party, but other groups sought to overthrow this new republic. Mao Zedong became the leader of the Chinese Communist Party. Of course, we know already communism exists in Russia, the Soviet Union. China is located just to the south. Mao Zedong, leader of the Communist Party, will try to take over, and there's going to be a civil war against Chiang Kai-shek for control. They continue to fight each other until the Japanese invaded in 1931. This will postpone their struggle until after World War II. More info on that a bit later. Number 2, Japan. Speaking of which, the rise of militarism. Japan desired a strong military to increase its control in the Far East. Its influence under the Meiji Restoration became aggression toward China and other nations. Japan developed into a strong financial and economic power as well. Japan developed a form of fascism to manage the growing economy. This financial and economic growth, along with a strong military, combined to form a military state with a growing appetite for foreign territory. More info on that next chapter. Number 3, the mandate system and colonial rule. Mandate's just simply the idea where Britain and France will gain possession of colonies that had previously been ruled by the Central Powers. Some complained that Britain and France merely divided the colonies to suit their interests. If you look in your books on page 321, it shows you the colonies that had at one point been Central Power colonies, now becoming British and French colonies. You can see their color coordination there. The idea of it being a mandate was they were supposed to be temporary colonies until they were ready to become independent nations. No timeline was provided, of course, for when they would become independent nations. And lastly, today, let's talk about the Middle East. With the destruction of the Ottoman Empire, many Arabs sought to establish a new, powerful nation. This idea was known as Pan-Arabism, or All-Arabism. It was a movement to unite the Middle East and North Africa into one nation. However, it will fail to materialize. One reason for its failure was the mandate system, which gave territory to Britain and France. And then later on, when Israel will become a nation, it continued to prevent Pan-Arabism from forming. Since then, Arab nations have systematically sought to destroy Israel. Some have even used rhetoric today. In recent years, it has transformed into a religious movement with the growing influence of what many refer to as militant Islam. Remember, if you have any questions on anything, homework, quizzes, tests, please, you can either email me or contact me via Skype. Remember, please, to make sure that you do all of the homework, including the ones from the activities book. No homework assigned for today. Hope you all have a good rest of the day. Be good, do good.